Commander Hyun-woo felt the cold metal of the command rail beneath his scaled fingers as he stared at the massive holographic display floating before him. The blue and green marble called Earth rotated slowly in the projection, its white clouds swirling like delicate brushstrokes across continents he would soon claim for the Empire. Around the planet, tiny dots of light marked what his intelligence reports called orbital defense platforms, though they looked more like floating scrap metal to his experienced eye. The bridge of the Dark Conquest hummed with activity. Keth Moran. Officers moved between their stations with predatory grace, their reptilian features gleaming under the red battle lights. This was their 848th conquest, and Hyun-woo had participated in over 200 of them personally. Each world fell the same way: initial shock, desperate resistance, then inevitable surrender. Earth would be no different. Admiral, communications. Officer Ji-won's forked tongue flicked nervously as she spoke. The humans are broadcasting on every frequency we monitor. The transmission is unusual. Fleet Admiral Dong-min didn't even lift his massive head from the tactical planning table where holographic fleet formations danced like deadly flowers. His scarred hide bore the marks of 100 battles, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency had earned him command of the Empire's most feared fleet. Unusual how? Are they offering tribute already? Some species learn quickly. No, sir. Ji-won hesitated. They're giving us an ultimatum. This caught Dongmin's attention. His yellow eyes, each the size of a human fist, focused on the communications station. Around the bridge, other officers paused in their duties. In the Empire's long history of conquest, prey species didn't give ultimatums to predators. Play it, Dongmin commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had watched stars die. The bridge fell completely silent except for the low thrum of the ship's massive engines. Even the usual chatter from the crew pits below ceased, as 10,000 Kethmaran warriors waited to hear what the humans had to say. The transmission crackled through the speakers, clear and steady. This is your first and final warning. Leave now. For a moment, absolute silence reigned. Then, starting from somewhere near the weapons console, laughter began to ripple across the bridge. It spread like wildfire through the crew, building into a crescendo of amused hisses and clicking sounds that passed for Kethmaran humor. Dongmin's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile if it hadn't revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. Final warning? His voice boomed across the bridge, drowning out the laughter. From a species that achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 cycles ago? From creatures so primitive they still use chemical rockets for local transport? He gestured with one clawed hand toward the tactical display, where Earth's pathetic orbital defenses were clearly visible. Look at their mighty fleet. A few hundred vessels, most of them converted cargo haulers. Our smallest corvettes could destroy 10 of their ships without taking damage. Tactical Officer Sung Min, whose job it was to assess enemy capabilities, pulled up detailed scans of the human vessels. Admiral, their largest ship mass is less than 1/10 of our destroyers. Their weapons appear to be primitive kinetic cannons and basic energy projectors. Our shields won't even register their attacks. And yet they dare threaten us, Dongmin mused, his amusement growing. He turned to Fleet Coordinator In-ho, whose job was to manage the movements of all 10,000 ships under Dongmin's command. Signal the fleet. All vessels are to begin attack formation. Show these humans what happens when prey threatens the predator. The bridge erupted into efficient activity. Officers called out status reports as the massive 7th Fleet began its deadly dance. Through the viewports, Hyun-woo could see the running lights of thousands of warships stretching into the darkness. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and dreadnoughts, each one capable of sterilizing a planet's surface. Fleet reports ready, Admiral, In-ho announced. All weapons charged, shields at maximum. The humans don't stand a chance. In the flagship's command center, located deep within the ship's armored core, Emperor Taeho watched the proceedings through his personal viewing screens. The Empire's absolute ruler reclined on his throne of polished bone and precious metals, his ancient eyes gleaming with anticipation. At over 300 cycles old, He had personally overseen the conquest of nearly half the Empire's territories. Another world for the Empire, he rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Another species to serve or be eliminated. The natural order continues. The Emperor's personal guard, elite warriors in powered armor, stood motionless around his throne. Each had been modified with cybernetic enhancements that made them faster and stronger than regular Kethmorans. They had never failed to protect their ruler, and they had never seen him show mercy to conquered peoples. As the fleet moved into attack position, sensor readings flooded the tactical displays. Earth's orbital stations powered up what appeared to be defensive systems. Energy shields flickered to life around the platforms, and weapon systems that looked barely functional began tracking the approaching fleet. Pathetic, Dongmin declared. Their entire planetary defense grid generates less energy than a single one of our battleships. This will be over in minutes. But something nagged at Hyunwoo as he watched the human preparations. In his long career, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this felt wrong. The humans weren't scrambling in panic like most species did when faced with the Empire's might. Their movements seemed methodical, prepared. "Begin the attack," Dongmin commanded. 10,000 warships surged forward, their weapons painting space with deadly light as they closed in on the small blue world that had dared to issue warnings to the mighty Kethmoran Empire. The void between worlds erupted into violence as Captain Sujin's small squadron of human defenders rushed forward to meet the approaching Kethmoran armada. Her flagship, the Soul's Pride, was barely a fifth the size of the smallest enemy destroyer, but she pressed forward with grim determination. Behind her, 49 other vessels followed in tight formation, converted mining ships, patrol, craft and research vessels hastily fitted with whatever weapons humanity could mount. All ships, engage at will, Sujin commanded through gritted teeth. She knew this was a suicide mission, but someone had to buy time for the evacuation protocols to complete. Make every shot count. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic railguns hurled metal slugs at incredible speeds while energy cannons painted space with brilliant beams of focused light. Against any normal opponent, the barrage would have been devastating. Against Kethmoran battle shields, it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Commander Hyunwoo watched from his bridge as the human projectiles struck his ship's shields and simply vanished in ripples of energy. "Pathetic," he sneered, his scaled lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. "Their weapons barely register on our sensors. It's like being attacked by insects." The Dark Conquest's main batteries swiveled toward the approaching human squadron. Each weapon was longer than Sujin's entire ship and packed enough firepower to level a city. When they fired, space itself seemed to tear apart. The first volley caught 3 human vessels directly, and they simply ceased to exist, not exploding but disintegrating into clouds of superheated plasma. "Return fire. All batteries, maximum spread," Hyunwoo barked. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency, targeting systems locking onto the scattered human formation. Admiral Dongmin stood at the center of his command bridge, watching the tactical display with savage satisfaction. Red dots representing human ships winked out one by one as his fleet's overwhelming firepower found its targets. Each explosion lit up space like a tiny star being born and dying in the same instant. "Excellent," he rumbled, his massive frame vibrating with pleasure. "These humans die as easily as all the others. Destroy them all. Show them the price of defying the Empire." Captain Sujin felt her ship shudder as enemy fire scorched past her hull. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, sweat beading on their faces despite the ship's environmental systems. Through the viewports, she could see her squadron being systematically torn apart by weapons that belonged in nightmares. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "the Busan runner is taking critical damage. Captain Minseo is requesting permission to abandon ship." "Granted," Sujin replied immediately. "All ships with critical damage, evacuate your crews. Emergency pods only. No time for anything else." Across the human formation, escape pods began launching from doomed vessels. the small spherical craft scattered in all directions, their occupants hoping to survive long enough for rescue. It was standard procedure when facing impossible odds: save the crew, sacrifice the ship. But something about the human retreat caught the attention of Tactical Officer Ye Jin aboard the Dark Conquest. Her reptilian features creased in concentration as she studied her sensor readings. Unlike most Kethmoran warriors, she had been trained to notice patterns, to see the bigger picture beyond individual battles. "Admiral," she called out, her voice cutting through the sounds of celebration on the bridge. "The human ships. They're evacuating their crews before we destroy them." Dongmin barely glanced in her direction, too focused on the beautiful destruction playing out before him. "Cowards abandoning their posts," he dismissed with a wave of his clawed hand. "Typical behavior from prey species. They lack the courage to die with honor." But Ye Jin wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Her instruments were telling her something strange was happening, something that didn't fit the normal pattern of conquest. She enhanced her sensor readings, focusing on the debris fields left behind by destroyed human vessels. "Sir," she said more urgently, "the debris patterns, they're not random. The wreckage is forming geometric shapes." This finally got Dongmin's attention. He turned his massive head toward the tactical station, yellow eyes narrowing. "Explain." Yejin's clawed fingers danced across her control panel, bringing up a three-dimensional display of the battle zone. Where random debris should have been scattered by explosions and gravitational forces, the remains of human ships were instead drifting into precise formations, triangles, hexagons, and complex mathematical patterns that seemed to serve some unknown purpose. "Look at this," she highlighted several debris clusters. "The human vessel fragments aren't behaving according to standard physics. Something is guiding them into position. Meanwhile, far below on Earth's surface, buried beneath 2 kilometers of reinforced concrete and hardened steel, Director Ji-hoon sat in a control room that had been waiting for this day for over 2 centuries. The chamber was filled with ancient technology that hummed with barely contained power, systems so old that their original designers were long dead, but so well built that they still functioned perfectly. Around him, dozens of technicians monitored screens showing the battle in space. Each human ship lost was marked on their displays, but instead of despair, their faces showed cold determination. This had always been part of the plan. "Sir," one of the technicians reported, "debris alignment at 60% and climbing. The enemy is taking the bait perfectly." Ji-hoon nodded slowly, his weathered hands moving across controls that few people on Earth even knew existed. These systems had been built by humanity's greatest minds during the early days of space exploration, when first contact protocols assumed the worst-case scenario. Every human ship, every orbital station, every piece of technology that went into space had been designed with one hidden purpose: to serve as components in a weapon system so vast that only now, with an actual invasion in progress, was it finally being activated. "Pattern formation looks good," another technician confirmed. "The Kethmorans have no idea what they're looking at." "Perfect," Ji-hoon said quietly. His finger hovered over a control that had waited 200 years to be pressed. Above them, human defenders were dying to maintain the illusion of weakness, sacrificing themselves so that humanity's greatest secret could remain hidden just a little longer. In space, the last few human defenders made their final stands. Captain Sujin's soul's pride limped through the debris field, her ship's hull cracked in bleeding atmosphere. But even as Kethmoran weapons found their mark and her vessel began to break apart, she smiled. The enemy had taken the bait completely. "Initiate Protocol Omega," Ji-hoon commanded quietly, his finger finally pressing the control that would change everything. Deep beneath Earth's surface, ancient systems that had slumbered for centuries began to wake up. The moment Protocol Omega activated, space around Earth transformed into something that defied everything the Kethmoran Empire understood about warfare. Commander Hyunwoo felt his blood turn to ice as he watched thousands of scattered debris. Pieces suddenly snap into perfect formation with mechanical precision that seemed impossible. "What in the void is that?" he gasped, his scaled hands trembling against the command rail. Where moments before there had been random wreckage floating through space, Now perfect geometric patterns stretched across thousands of kilometers. Triangular, formations the size of small moons. Hexagonal arrays that pulsed with inner light and complex mathematical structures that hurt to look at directly. The debris wasn't just moving, it was transforming, reshaping itself into components of something vast and terrifying. The arrays began to glow with an energy that made every Kethmoran instrument on the bridge scream urgent warnings. Barninger. Lights bathed the dark conquest in blood-red illumination, as systems that had never failed before started reporting impossible readings. Admiral Dongmin felt his first real tremor of unease in over a century of conquest. Around Earth, space itself seemed to bend and twist like heated metal. Stars visible through the viewports shifted position as gravitational forces beyond comprehension warped reality itself. "Sir," Tactical Officer Yejin's voice cracked with barely controlled fear. "Energy readings are completely off the scale. Our instruments can't even measure what's happening out there. The debris, it's channeling power from their sun, their planetary core, and sources we can't identify." The sensor displays showed energy streams flowing between the geometric arrays like rivers of liquid starlight. Power was being drawn from Earth's molten core through invisible conduits, siphoned from the local star through mechanisms that shouldn't exist, and somehow channeled from locations throughout the solar system that had appeared completely empty on their initial scans. "This is impossible," Dongmin growled. But even as he spoke, his experienced warrior's instincts were screaming danger. No species develops weapons like this in 50 cycles of spaceflight. Our intelligence reports showed primitive chemical rockets and basic fusion drives. On Earth's surface, in the primary command bunker buried deep beneath the planet's crust, President So-Young stood before a wall of displays showing the activation sequence. Her weathered face remained calm, but her eyes held the weight of decisions that had been made centuries before her birth. Around her, technicians monitored systems that represented humanity's greatest secret and their last hope. "Madam President," Director Ji-hoon reported from his station, "all primary arrays are online and synchronized. Power levels are nominal. The Kethmoran fleet is trapped within our operational perimeter." So-Young nodded slowly. She had trained for this moment her entire life, as had her predecessors going back 10 generations. Humanity had learned painful lessons from their first encounters with hostile alien species, and they had never forgotten those lessons. "Open a channel to their fleet," she commanded. The transmission array beneath Earth's surface was powerful enough to punch through any interference the Kethmorans might attempt. When So-Young spoke, her voice carried across space with the calm authority of someone who held the power to end worlds. "You ignored our warning," she began, her words reaching every ship in the enemy fleet simultaneously. "We are not the primitive species you believed us to be. We have been spacefaring for 5 centuries, and we have learned that the only way to ensure peace is to make war too costly to consider." Aboard the Dark Conquest, the bridge fell silent as the human president's words sank in. 5 centuries of spaceflight meant humanity had achieved faster than light travel before the Kethmoran Empire had even discovered fire. Everything they thought they knew about these people was wrong. "Impossible," Admiral Dongmin whispered, but the evidence was mounting around them. The geometric arrays pulsing with impossible energy, the gravitational distortions that were holding his fleet in place, the technological sophistication that had been hidden so perfectly it fooled the Empire's best intelligence analysts. Deep, in the command ship's throne room, Emperor Taeho's confident smile faded like morning mist as his personal sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the human solar system. What his scouts had reported as simple mining asteroids were revealing themselves as weapon platforms of incomprehensible power. Structures that had appeared to be communications relays were unfolding into devices that seemed to bend space and time. "Advisor Kang Dae," the Emperor called to his chief scientist, his voice unusually strained. "Explain to me how an entire species can hide technology this advanced." The elderly Kethmoran shuffled forward, his own instruments confirming readings that challenged everything he understood about physics. "My lord, the energy signatures suggest these humans have mastered technologies we consider theoretical impossibilities. Gravity manipulation, stellar engineering, quantum-level matter conversion. They've built these systems into their entire solar system. Through the viewports of the Kethmoran ships, space around Earth continued to transform. What had appeared to be empty space now revealed itself to be filled with invisible structures, massive constructs that had been hidden using technology beyond the Empire's understanding. Weapon platforms the size of small planets phased into visibility, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with contained energy. "Look at the asteroid belt," gasped Navigation Officer Minho from his station. "It's not natural debris. It's a weapon system." The rocky asteroids between Mars and Jupiter were moving, rotating into new positions with mechanical precision. Each chunk of space rock was revealing itself to be a carefully crafted component in a defense system that spanned the entire solar system. Hidden engines fired, adjusting orbits that had been maintained for centuries while appearing completely natural to outside observers. Commander Hyunwoo realized with growing horror that humanity had turned their entire solar system into a trap. Every planet, every moon, every piece of space debris had been modified over centuries to serve as part of one massive weapon. The humans hadn't just prepared for invasion, they had prepared for the complete annihilation of any force foolish enough to threaten their world. "Admiral," Communications Officer Jiwon reported with trembling voice, "we're receiving detailed scans of our fleet. The humans know the exact specifications of every ship, every weapon system, every defensive capability we possess. They've been studying us since we entered their space." The tactical implications hit Dongmin like a physical blow. While his forces had been focused on what appeared to be primitive human defenses, the humans had been analyzing every aspect of Kethmoran technology. They knew exactly how to counter every weapon, how to penetrate every shield, how to exploit every weakness in the Empire's supposedly invincible fleet. Around Earth, the geometric arrays reached full power. Space itself rippled like water, as forces beyond normal understanding prepared to demonstrate why humanity had remained peaceful for so long. Not from weakness, but from the knowledge that their true strength was too terrible to unleash except in the face of extinction. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the Kethmoran Empire was about to learn why 40 other species had disappeared without a trace, after ignoring humanity's simple warning. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong came from Navigation Officer Minho's panicked voice cutting through the bridge of the Dark Conquest. "Gravitational distortions detected," he screamed, his clawed hands flying across his control panel as impossible readings flooded his instruments. "We can't break orbit. Something's holding us here." Admiral Dongmin felt his massive frame go rigid as the implications hit him. His fleet of 10,000 warships, vessels designed to travel between stars and conquer worlds, were now trapped like insects in a web they couldn't see or understand. The tactical display showed every ship in his armada struggling against invisible forces that defied everything the Kethmoran Empire knew about physics. "Full power to engines," he roared. "All ships, emergency burn, break free." But even as his orders went out, the horrifying truth became clear. The humans hadn't just prepared defenses, they had turned their entire solar system into a prison. Gravitational fields were being manipulated on a scale that shouldn't be possible, creating invisible barriers that held the Kethmoran fleet in place like flies trapped in amber. Commander Hyunwoo watched through the viewports as space around them warped and twisted. Stars that should have been fixed points of light began to shift and dance as the humans demonstrated mastery over forces that the Empire considered beyond mortal control. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "No species can manipulate gravity on this scale." Admiral Dongmin watched in growing horror as Earth's hidden defenses came online with terrifying efficiency. Asteroids that had appeared to be nothing more than space rocks split open like mechanical flowers, revealing weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the Kethmoran arsenal. Each installation was the size of a small city, bristling with energy, cannons that could crack planets and void weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. "Sir," Tactical Officer Yejin reported, her voice barely a whisper, "the asteroids aren't natural. They're artificial constructs, weapon platforms that have been disguised for centuries. Our sensors show at least 50,000 of them throughout the system." The scale of the deception was staggering. While the Kethmaran Empire had been conquering worlds and building their armada, humanity had been quietly transforming their entire solar system into the ultimate defensive network. Every piece of space debris, every minor planet, every seemingly empty region of space had been modified to serve as part of one massive weapon system. Star manipulator arrays began drawing energy directly from the human sun, channels of pure, stellar fire flowing through invisible conduits to power weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. The local star itself pulsed with unnatural rhythms as its energy was harvested and focused into instruments of destruction that made the Empire's planet crackers look like children's toys. On Earth's surface, President So Young stood in the command center with the calm demeanor of someone who had expected this day for her entire life. Around her, screens showed the trapped Kethmoran fleet struggling helplessly against forces they couldn't comprehend. Her advisors waited silently, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity continued to exist in peace or whether they would have to add another species to their grim historical record. "Broadcast our history," she ordered coldly. The transmission that reached every Kethmoran ship was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. Instead of desperate pleas or offers of surrender, the humans sent a calm, factual presentation that chilled the blood of every warrior who heard it. "You are the 41st species to ignore our warning." President So Young's voice carried across space with the weight of absolute authority. "We have given the same message to 40 others over 3 centuries. None of them exist anymore. We are not conquerors. We are gardeners who tend our small corner of the galaxy. But threaten our garden and you will learn why nothing else has tried twice." The historical records that followed were presented with scientific precision. 40 different species, 40 different empires, all of them powerful civilizations that had dominated their regions of space. The Zarkanian hegemony, masters of biological warfare who had conquered 1,000 worlds. The Crystal Collective, silicon-based beings who could survive in the vacuum of space. The Void Hunters, energy beings who fed on stellar radiation and considered organic life to be nothing more than useful slaves. Each empire had received the same simple warning that the Kethmorans had ignored. "This is your first and final warning. Leave now." And each empire had made the same fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity was bluffing. Commander Hyun-woo stared at the tactical display showing the complete destruction of previous fleets. The recording showed massive armadas, some even larger, than the Kethmoran 7th Fleet, being systematically dismantled by weapons that seemed to operate on principles beyond conventional understanding. Ships didn't just explode. They were unmade at the molecular level, their component atoms scattered across space in perfect geometric patterns. How were we not warned?" he gasped, his voice barely audible over the growing hum of human weapons powering up around them. President So Young's reply cut through the bridge communications with surgical precision. "Because dead empires cannot pass on warnings." The full implications of that statement hit the Kethmoran leadership like a physical blow. 40 civilizations had vanished without a trace, their territories empty, their worlds abandoned. The galactic community had assumed they had destroyed themselves in civil wars or fallen to natural disasters. Nobody had suspected that they had all made the same mistake. They had threatened humanity's small corner of space. Emperor Taiho, monitoring the situation from his throne ship, felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of rule. Genuine fear. His empire had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds, but the humans were casually discussing the complete annihilation of 40 different species as if it were a routine matter of planetary maintenance. "Advisor Kang Dae," he called to his chief scientist, his voice strained. "Are the humans lying? Could they really have destroyed 40 different empires?" The elderly Kethmoran was studying sensor readings that confirmed his worst fears. "My lord, the energy signatures we're detecting suggest they could destroy 40 empires simultaneously. These weapons, they operate on scales we can barely comprehend." Around the trapped fleet, more human installations came online. What had appeared to be minor moons revealed themselves to be artificial constructs, weapon platforms that had been built over centuries and disguised so perfectly that even close inspection hadn't revealed their true nature. The humans had been preparing for this day for 500 years, building defenses that could stand against any conceivable threat. "Sir," Communications Officer Ji-won reported with terror in her voice, "we're receiving detailed specifications of every ship we've ever built, every weapon system we've developed, every strategic doctrine we've employed. The humans have been studying us for decades. They know everything about our military capabilities. The tactical situation was beyond hopeless. It was impossible. The humans had turned their solar system into a trap that could hold and destroy entire galactic empires. They had mastered technologies that the Kethmorans couldn't even understand, let alone counter. And they had done it all while maintaining the perfect illusion of being primitive, peaceful people who wanted nothing more than to be left alone." Admiral Dongmin realized with dawning horror that humanity hadn't just prepared for invasion. They had prepared for the complete elimination of any species foolish enough to threaten them. The warning they had given wasn't a bluff or an empty threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the calm certainty of gardeners explaining what happened to pests that invaded their carefully tended space. The Kethmoran Empire, masters of nearly 1,000 worlds, had walked into a trap that had been waiting for them for centuries, and now they were about to learn why 40 other empires had simply vanished from the galaxy without anyone ever knowing what had happened to them. Emperor Taeho's ancient claws dug deep gouges into the armrests of his bone throne as he watched the impossible unfold before his eyes. Through the massive viewing screens that surrounded his command chamber, he witnessed the systematic destruction of the Seventh Fleet, his pride, his invincible armada that had never tasted defeat in over 2 centuries of conquest. The human weapons didn't behave like anything in the known galaxy. Kethmoran ships didn't just explode in the traditional sense, they were being unmade at the most fundamental level. Each vessel caught in the geometric energy fields simply ceased to exist. Their molecular bonds dissolved as if reality itself was being rewritten. What remained were perfect spheres of glowing atoms, each one containing the scattered remains of what had once been a mighty warship. "This cannot be happening," Taeho whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. Around him, his elite guards stood frozen in their powered armor, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the scale of destruction playing out in space. These warriors had never seen their emperor show fear, and the sight of his terror was almost as shocking as the annihilation of the fleet. Commander Hyun-woo aboard the Dark Conquest felt his ship shudder as the human weapons began targeting the flagship. Through the bridge viewports, he could see the geometric arrays realigning, their crystalline structures pulsing with energy that hurt to look at directly. The debris patterns that had seemed so harmless were now revealing their true purpose. They were the focusing elements of a weapon system that could rewrite the laws of physics. "All hands, brace for impact," he screamed, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew there was no defense against what was coming. The energy beam that struck the Dark Conquest didn't burn through the hull or overload the shields. It simply convinced the ship's atoms that they no longer wanted to maintain their current arrangement. Admiral Dongmin watched in stunned silence as his flagship began to dissolve around him. The metal walls weren't melting or exploding, they were just stopping being metal. The process was so gentle, so precise, that the bridge crew had time to watch their own hands become transparent before they joined the expanding sphere of liberated atoms that had once been the most feared ship in the Kethmoran fleet. Back on his throne ship, Emperor Taeho realized that his 3-century reign was about to end not in glorious battle but in complete humiliation. The empire that had conquered nearly 1,000 worlds was being casually dismantled by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Every tactical doctrine, every strategic advantage, every technological superiority the Kethmorans possessed was proving useless against weapons that operated beyond their understanding. "My lord," his personal advisor Kang Dae whispered, his elderly voice shaking with terror. "We must surrender. There is no shame in yielding to power this absolute." Taeho's pride warred with his survival instincts as he watched ship after ship disappear into geometric patterns of organized atoms. The humans weren't even targeting them with hatred or anger. They were working with the methodical efficiency of exterminators dealing with an infestation. The casual nature of humanity's overwhelming power was somehow more terrifying than any display of rage would have been. "Surrender!" he finally screamed into his communicator, his voice echoing through the command chamber. "I offer unconditional surrender. Stop this destruction." The effect was immediate and somehow even more unsettling than the weapons themselves. The geometric arrays simply stopped firing. The energy fields that had been systematically dissolving Kethmoran ships went dark. The gravitational distortions that held the remaining vessels in place eased just enough to allow them to drift, but not enough to let them escape. Humanity had demonstrated that they could start and stop universal destruction with the same casual ease most species use to turn on lights. President So-Young's face appeared on every screen throughout the Kethmoran Empire simultaneously. The technology required to hack into an entire civilization's communication network without their knowledge should have been impossible, yet the humans had done it as effortlessly as everything else. Her expression was neither cruel nor gloating. She looked like a teacher delivering a lesson to students who had finally understood the consequences of their actions. "Your fleet is destroyed," she stated with calm authority. "Your emperor lives only because we choose mercy over justice. Let this be recorded in every galactic archive. Earth asked for nothing but peace. When threatened, we defended ourselves with the full measure of our capability." Around the surviving Kethmoran ships, automated recording devices emerged from hidden compartments in the human weapon platforms. Every moment of the battle, every demonstration of humanity's overwhelming technological superiority, was being documented in perfect detail. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a historical lesson that would be preserved for all time. "Mark our system with warning beacons," President So-Young continued. "Let every species know. We gave you fair warning." Deep beneath Earth's surface, Director Ji-hoon's weathered hands moved across the ancient control systems that had protected humanity for centuries. Around him, technicians began the process of powering down weapons that could have continued destroying fleets for days without strain. The geometric arrays in space began folding back into their disguised configurations, once again appearing to be nothing more than scattered debris. "Set the beacons, President So-Young," he said quietly. "The same message in every language. They gave you fair warning." Across the Sol system, warning buoys began emerging from hidden installations. Each beacon broadcast the same simple message in thousands of different languages, ensuring that every spacefaring species in the galaxy would understand. This small corner of space was protected by forces beyond their ability to challenge. Emperor Taeho, his pride shattered but his life spared, gave the orders that would reshape galactic politics. The Kethmoran Empire, masters of conquest and terror, became the guardians of humanity's secret. They established exclusion zones around human space, turning away any species that might be curious about the small blue world and its peaceful inhabitants. In the decades that followed, the Sol system became a legend across the galaxy. Traders whispered stories of the warning beacons that surrounded a small star system, each one bearing the same ominous message. Military commanders used the tale of the Kethmoran defeat as a cautionary story about the dangers of underestimating seemingly primitive species. Humanity returned to their quiet existence, tending their corner of space with the same patient care they had always shown. Their orbital stations went back to their peaceful research, their ships continued their exploration of nearby systems, and their people lived their lives without the burden of conquest or the need to prove their strength to anyone. But throughout the galaxy, every species that looked up at the stars knew the truth. Somewhere in the darkness was a small blue world surrounded by warnings that no species ever ignored twice. The gardeners had returned to their work, content in the knowledge that wisdom, backed by the ultimate demonstration of consequence, would keep the peace. The lesson had been taught, recorded, and remembered. And in the vast expanse of space, silence reigned around a small system where beings who wanted nothing more than to be left alone had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes from hoping you never have to use it. The end